Yeah, we are live. Welcome to Gentle Discipline. I've got Jari Roomer here. He is the co-founder of Write, Build, Scale, which is an online business development program that is specifically for Substack, which is how we met. But honestly, ever since we had our first kind of call together, I was like, oh, I really vibe with this guy. I like talking with him a lot. So welcome, man. How are you?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Likewise, actually, I'm great. Really looking forward to this podcast episode together.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to try to steer the conversation away from Substack, but don't hesitate to add anything because I'm sure a lot of these viewers will get a lot out of everything that you say. So, but yeah, I'm super curious about just like your past, where you're from, kind of like what led you down this road, where you're at now, where you see yourself going, and in particular, just this. I know this kind of like approach to freedom and entrepreneurial mindset and just kind of like this sovereign lifestyle is something that you and I click on. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna launch that bomb out there and see what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been like a decade this year. Actually, I'm celebrating 10 years of entrepreneurship,
Cool.
and it's also been like I think 12 years ago that I discovered I was unemployable,
Mm,
and not in the sense of I was like I could learn skills. I would actually do a really good job at all like the jobs I had. But I like when I worked 9 to 5 primarily, I was miserable. Even when I worked at really cool companies, like I worked at a tech startup, amazing people, really good culture there. I loved that company, but just something about having to show up at 9 o'clock sharp in the office and like making sure like you couldn't even leave 15 minutes early because you would need to have a reason for it. That whole lifestyle, like it made me super unhappy. And I found myself like actually calling in sick to work, even though I wasn't sick, but I was like struggling so much with that like lifestyle. And I was like, you know what? This is not for me. I should do my own thing. I always knew that I wanted to like build my own business and that entrepreneurship was something I wanted to pursue. But initially I thought like you need to like invent something cool, right? You need to, I don't know, have $100,000 in startup funds to start something. But then I just went on a path of like, okay, how can I start a side hustle? How can I do something online, right? And I really started researching this idea behind an online business, which was completely novel to me at the time. And I would say like about a decade ago, it was still like in the baby shoes, and the only real person to go to was like Tim Ferriss with the 4 hour work week. So of course that's the book I purchased and read, and I was like mind blown. I was like, there's something here. This is exactly what I want. I want my own online business so I can work from wherever I want, whether that's at home or when I'm traveling. I really determine like my own schedule. But of course, that is a very ideal picture, right? And it's really this dream that you're pursuing. And for the first 2 years of me running my own business, I can tell you it was a big struggle. Like it took me a year and a half before I actually made my first revenue. So it was a lot of like trial and error up until that point. But now, we fast forward 10 years later, and I'm fortunate to have a really amazing business together with my co-founder Cinnamon Philip. And yeah, it's good.
it's funny, so many people that see the business that you've built or anyone has built, they just see this, this landmark that's in front of them, like, oh, this is amazing. This is what I want. And they don't see the blood, sweat, and tears that really goes into it. But it's funny. I want to kind of back up before we jump too far into that and just talk about like, okay, that personality trait or that quirk or whatever it is, because I possess it as well. That cannot keep you in a 9 to 5. And and I was in the friggin' army, and it was like I don't know how I lasted for 5 years in the army, man. I really don't. But as I was leaving the army, I got put behind a desk, and so in like a very typical kind of 9 to 5 thing, and being behind a desk in the regimented structure of the military. I had like mental health crisis just ballooning, and I was like, this is not good. I have to get out of this. But I'm just kind of curious, like, from your standpoint, even though you had jobs that were like, oh, it's a cool company, like decent culture, everything, like what was it? Was it like a problem with authority, or what was it that like drew you away?
Yeah, I think. It's in particular the lack of freedom. So
Mm,
and lack of flexibility. So if I feel like I need a breath of fresh air and I need to take a walk outside, but I need to have a reason to do it, or like you need to be back in time, that's just something that feels me like it feels like I'm stuck.
mm,
And I think the moment I feel like I'm stuck and I cannot really be flexible with my day, that triggers a whole lot of things within me, that a lot of resistance, right? And I think there's only so many days or weeks you can keep up with that resistance and kind of like push it to the side before something starts to crack.
mm,
And I think what I said, right, the moment I discovered or I found myself um calling myself sick into work even though I wasn't fully sick. Maybe to a certain degree I was, like you say, like mentally just
sure.
not feeling great at all, right? And that to me was a sign, okay, I need to change something because it's not fair to the company I'm working for. They're great people, and it's not fair to myself. And like how long can you really tolerate that with while like ignoring such strong call to actions, right? Because I really see it that way. If there is something that you don't feel great about in your day-to-day life, that's a call to action to go and change it, right? And to go and solve it or pursue this better thing, whether it is in your health, in your finances, in your relationship, in your business. I always see that like a call to action, really, to then go and make a change.
Yeah, and it's it's always interesting to me because there's I don't know what the percentage is, but it's got to be less than 1% of people, probably half a percent of people are actual entrepreneurs. Like most people have a 9 to 5 and they do this thing. And so I really like talking to fellow entrepreneurs, especially the ones that have like the bug that like I can't work for someone else, you know? It's always fun to see, you know, the other side of the coin. But, so when you were so as you kinda made this transition, you're like, "Okay, so Signal is like, I want to escape from this. This is" so what was your first kind of endeavor? Like, where did you start, like, swinging at the balls that were coming your way?
Yeah. I I really went on a search. Like I acknowledged the fact that I didn't have the answer and that I needed to go and look for the answer, right? So I'm a firm believer in taking a look at who has the results that I want and how can I learn from them as much as possible and kind of like reverse engineer what they're doing. And not just one person. I like to take like 5 or 10 role models in any given field. So that could be for fitness, but in this case for running an online business, and I would really take a look at what are they doing? Can I listen to their podcast, buy their books? Can I invest in their courses to absorb myself with all of this information, and not even just information, but just the messaging, right? And the belief of what's possible. And that helped me just overall get started because if you don't know, you don't know, right? So like first start with who has the results that I want to achieve and learn from them. And that's when I really realized, okay, you can start an online business based on some of the existing knowledge and expertise you already have, be it from something you studied, be it from something you're doing in your day-to-day life, be it something in your professional career, right, that you did learn at your job, but now you're going to do it as freelance or solo. And for me, the realization really was like, for even since I was a student, like back in university, my friends would always ask me for productivity advice because I would like be good at focusing, get things done. Um, and even in my 9 to 5 job, right, that was something I would actually be good at. And I was like, let's take that as like the starting point for my first online business. So I turned that into a productivity newsletter. That's how I got started. And I just started writing on medium.com back in the days. That's
Did
where
you
I
kn
got
did you know that, like, a newsletter, because a newsletter is so powerful, and so did you know going into it that a newsletter was kinda, like, the way to go, or did you, like, fall into that accidentally?
this was really like by absorbing my the lessons from my role models.
Cool.
All of them would say build an email list, it's your most valuable asset. So I was like, okay, cool, if that's the most valuable asset, that's what I'm going to build. And that's kind of how it got started. So I realized, okay, I kind of know what my newsletter, what I want it to be, but of course you need subscribers, right? So that's why I started writing on Medium. That's where I built my initial following and um, got people to join my productivity newsletter. Then I was like, oh, cool, I have this productivity newsletter, but I'm still not generating that much. So then I expanded into digital products, right? And courses and coaching. But yeah, it was really this. by surrounding myself, and when I say surrounding myself, for me that was digitally, right? So it was podcast, it was courses, it was YouTube, all of that. Surrounding myself with the right mentors who all said, "Start an email list. That's the one thing you need to be doing." That's how I really got started with that.
And so, while you're surrounding yourself with mentors, especially digitally, and it's podcasts and books and consumption, obviously you're creating at the same time that you're consuming. And so, I find that today this is a really hard line for me to walk sometimes, and for most people to walk. It's like, okay, what is the ratio of consumption to creation? And it's generally just a thing that I kind of feel out now, but it took me a long time to get there. And so I guess underneath all of that is, how do you maintain yourself through all of this and not just mimic someone else?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I mean, the one thing that comes to my mind is I am I am per definition a person who learns by seeing other people do it, and then kind of automatically I give it my own twist. It's not really something I have a conscious thought process about. But I think when I would, like, copy someone one on one, it would feel icky. It would feel like I would not feel right,
Mhm.
so I wouldn't do that. But regarding the conversation of, like, consumption and creation, that's very interesting because I mentioned how it took me a year and a half to generate my first revenue with my online business.
Mhm.
The reason why actually was because there was an element of information overload. So one podcast was telling me to do this, the other one was telling me to do something else, and it would be this shiny object syndrome because everything was new in the world of, like, online business and marketing. So everything seemed like a better opportunity, and I found myself hopping between a lot of different projects, products, and, like, opportunities without real focus. I think if I would have zoomed in on just one method, um, I would have generated revenue a lot faster. Then again, I feel like that period of my life, I just absorbed so much that it also, like, I still reap the rewards from it, even though it took me a bit longer in those initial stages to get going.
Do you think if you would have like zoomed in, let's say too quickly, or more quickly than you did, rather, do you think that you would have run the risk of picking the wrong thing?
Right? Because that's the thing, you don't know which method is actually gonna be effective, and also which of the methods suits you the best as an individual. So I think it was, this process of trial and error and experimentation, um, that was very helpful because I could really see even things like, short form content, right? That's something a lot of, um, my role models would do, and I started doing it on Instagram, and I was like, "Wow, this is not me at all." But then some of my role models were like, "You gotta do long form, maybe, like the long form writing," and that I gave that a shot as a shiny object, and I discovered, wow, this is really something I enjoy. So I think there was an element of treating that initial states like exploration, experimentation,
Mhm.
with a level of guidance for sure, but it that was very helpful in discovering what actually worked for
And
me.
yeah, I could not agree with you more. Like, some level of play and experimentation, exploration is just it's massive as an entrepreneur and just as a curious person in general to find what it is that you want to do for the next X amount of months, years, whatever. But like one of the things that I kind of run into trouble with when I'm working with people that want to start a business, that want to turn like a passion into a side hustle thing, is this balance between real life and and how much real life costs and starting a business, because as you've mentioned, I didn't make my first dollar for a year and a half. And and I think that's similar for a lot of entrepreneurs. It takes, like, I think we underestimate how long it actually takes to start getting it to the point where people are paying us for services and products. And so what would you say to someone who is like, man, I've got kids to feed, and how do I, but I don't want to just like stay, with the golden handcuffs. I'm not trying to stay attached to this job that I hate either.
Yeah, yeah, this is really one of those things where I would never recommend someone to just quit cold turkey and go all in.
Mhm.
Like, I think that is it really depends on your situation, right? Because indeed, if you do have a family, you got kids to feed, you have a mortgage to pay, there's real risk, real downside. And you add a lot of pressure to yourself to make it work. Now, that pressure can be motivation, but it's no guarantee that it's going to work, right? I think the one thing that I'll just be honest about that I was fortunate with is that a decade ago when I got started, I didn't have a lot of responsibility yet. Like I had rent to pay, I had groceries, but I was 19, 20 years old, right? So I could afford some element of risk. And what I did back then was I got a part-time job, which was driving cars here in the Netherlands throughout the whole country. I would like deliver cars. If someone purchased a car, to the other side of the country, I would deliver it to them. And what I would do, I would kind of like use that time, which was my job, to then put on podcasts and audio courses while I was driving those cars. So that way I could like learn while working at the same time. But I realized that that's a unique situation as well, right? So I would say, assuming a place where I'm in right now, where I have a baby on the way, like there's way more responsibilities, right? Let's say I was in a similar situation, I would really plan for it, financially plan for it. Like, do you have a buffer, a financial buffer that allows you time and flexibility? Is there, is it possible to maybe work part time, for example, work less? Is it possible to get a different job? If all of that is a no, then the unfortunate reality is you don't use your 9 to 5, but your 5 to 9, right? So it's like the hours before work or the hours after work, which is, I recognize that's hard, right? It's a hard thing to do, but ultimately it's harder to stay stuck in a position that just slowly destroys you. So it's trading short term pain for long term gain. That's how I would see it. And I realize it's hard, but that's what I would do. Like use 1 hour before work or 1 hour after work to really focus on building your online business, for example. Because if you do that for 6 months to 12 months, it will guaranteed give you progress. It will get you in the right direction.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you said something early in that response to that is the truth with everything, right? Like it depends. It depends on your unique situation for sure. But the other thing also that is so true is just like it's the organization of your energy, right? Like if wherever you dump the most energy, like that's where you're going to see progress in your life, and that's period, you know. And so if you just remain stuck in the same familiar habits of I'm giving it to my boss or I'm giving it to my company or whatever, then that's where it's going to stay. But if you start, leveraging the time that you have, just like you said, because everyone, no matter where you work, I mean, obviously, if you're making, you're some big shot lawyer or making, you're billing, $1,000 an hour or whatever, like that's where your energy is going. But most people that are considering starting something are in a position where they could probably leverage their time a little bit differently towards things that reward them in the long run. Yeah, it is like a different puzzle for everyone though, I think
Yeah.
to figure out.
It
Yep.
really is. It really is. But I would say start small in that sense, right? If you really find yourself being crunched time wise, but you really want this, you're like, I want this to build an online business. I want to grow an audience. I want to pursue a career path or business that is way more aligned with the life I want to live. It's always worth to at least get started with. You don't have to go all in from day one. You could literally start with half an hour per day, right? If that's before work, if it's in your break, if it's during work, even if you have the time. Um, and start by, okay, what do I want to build? Who already has the outcomes, who
Mhm.
has the business that I want to build? What can I learn from them? That would be a great starting point. But there is an element of patience involved, and keeping a long-term perspective. I did a Substack live yesterday actually, and there was someone in the chat and she was like, I've been on Substack for 2 weeks now and I'm frustrated that no one is reading my work. And I was like, that's exactly how your first 2 weeks will look like, and probably a bit longer as well. It's
Definitely.
completely normal, and I really tried to help her, and she was very open to being helped as well, but I was like, "If you're gonna be frustrated with 2 weeks, it's gonna be frustrating for you, right?" Because all good things in life take time, whether that is a good relationship, whether it's a profitable business, whether it's a strong body, it takes time, right? It's really the compound effect that's at play.
Something that's really interesting here, right? Because I built a brick and mortar business first, and I built a gym in Phoenix, Arizona, and building that was entirely different than what I'm doing now. Online is a completely different game. That being said, I still, when I first started that gym, I did not understand anything as far as the systems that I understand now, because now I feel like I have time to dig into these things. But when I was running that gym, it was like there were these seasons to it. And it took me a long time to figure out that everything is seasonal. So like frustration is a seasonal thing and success is seasonal, and you have these spurts of greatness and then it falls back. And we tend, when we're going through anything like good or bad, we assign like this longevity to it and like that it's going to last forever. And nothing is. Like, I think the nature of all of it is that it like rises and then it persists for a while and then it fades. And I think understanding that as you go is just so helpful to help you keep that, like, keep your consistency up and keep up the endurance for the long run.
Absolutely. I really think of life as seasons, right? It's even seasons where you might be more focused on your business, and other seasons you might be more focused on building your body and your relationship. Some seasons are way more balanced, but there is definitely this element of it's o- it's really okay. It's normal, really, if you are, for example, building your business for the first time, that you'll feel like, what am I doing? I don't know if this is going to work out. I don't know if it's even possible. That's completely normal to experience, normal to think. I really see it as a filtering process because with each moment where there is a struggle or like you question, am I able to do this? Is this even worth it? When are things going to speed up? That's exactly questions where people drop off.
Mm,
I don't believe significantly in competition, but let's just use that word. Your competition is dropping off at each of those like questions and challenges. So simply sticking with it and going through those seasons is already a filtering process that's essential to go through.
mm. So, gosh, you mentioned a couple of things that I want to take a look at. But as far as the seasons go, have you experienced, like, you were kind of hinting at like this imposter syndrome that most entrepreneurs go through at least a little bit here and there. It's something that I kind of like. It seems to like circle back every couple of years or whatever it is when I'm trying to do something new. And it's an interesting thing to explore because when you're going through it, you're like, oh, no one has felt this way before. No one has felt like such a fraud or a sham or whatever it is. You're like, this is so hard. And do I know what I'm doing? You ask all these questions. Do you have, experience or like kind of any words that you would want to share about that, since you've done this a couple times now?
Oh yeah, imposter syndrome I think is one of the most common things that a lot of people share. They might not own up to it or share it publicly, but it's really a universal thing. I think you either belong in one of two camps, and there's not really a middle ground. In a sense of it's either overconfidence
Mm,
or like this level of imposter syndrome. Um, and this could also depend on your seasons of life because when I got started, when I was like 19, 20, and I had all this energy and motivation to start, I was highly overconfident. Like I thought I'm going to do this within a few months, I'll have a successful business. But then after a reality check, I found out that's not the case. Um, then it shifted more towards imposter syndrome the moment I actually started succeeding and my
mm,
productivity newsletter blew up. It became very profitable. There were a lot of people started to like engage with my content. And I felt like, oh, but I feel like a fraud, or like I feel like this is, like it's this subconscious pattern that I think is just normal to experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very normal too, but it's still very difficult. Even, and it's something that I've experienced in multiple arenas and multiple different times. Military, gym owner, on consultant, coach, like all these different things. There's when people are asking you for your advice or how to do something or something. It's not like you have a blueprint always for the exact thing that they are needing from you, and so you do your best, and it's very interesting to like manage that feeling, at least intellectually, of being like, okay, well, like, I think I can help you. And that being said, I'm not like a guru. I'm not like the world's top expert on this, but I want to help you. And then also, then like when you work for yourself and you're an entrepreneur, like also, I would like you to pay me for that help. And that's where a lot of people, like, their relationship with money really gets in the way. And so that is, I'd be very interested to hear about like how that kind of like the relationship with money has looked for you. Maybe like you're, growing up, if that had anything to do with, how you handle it now and just your take on it
Mm,
nowadays.
yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question because I came from, like my parents would like I grew up in social housing, right? So my parents never had a lot of money. I can't complain. I had a great childhood, but I came from a family that didn't have a lot of money. And the advice I always got from my parents was like, you gotta save. Like you gotta save because like if things go wrong, like that's at least what you have. But then there was never a lot of savings. I think the moment I was very comfortable with the first months and years of having a business that wasn't very profitable because that's what I was comfortable with growing up, actually not having a lot. The moment my business became more profitable, that's actually when I found subconscious patterns I wasn't aware that I had. Like I discovered that the identity of me being a profitable entrepreneur was not yet an identity I actually had, probably based on the way I grew up. So I found very subconscious ways to kind of like sabotage my own success in a way. So I would have profitable offers that I was like, you know what? I think I can do better. I should probably, instead of this offer that's actually selling, I'm going to create something new that's probably going to do better. That was a subconscious pattern of me sabotaging my own success in hindsight.
Mhm.
I did not realize that when it was going on. In hindsight, I realized, hey, my identity, what I truly believed about myself, and my reality were a mismatch. Therefore, I was going to find a way to like sabotage it all. I think now I became way more comfortable with it. And I simply have designed systems that kind of like make it not impossible, but very difficult for myself to like the systems will work regardless of the way I feel
Mhm.
and regardless of the way I see myself. And therefore it kind of transformed the way I see myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does, and it's something I try to like coach people on as far as like discipline does not have to be hard for you, and especially if you tie it to like how you feel. Like, yeah, when I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, like I don't want to go to the gym, I don't want to go run always. Like sometimes I do, but like not always. And so if if I make it about that, like I'll find every reason not to go. And
Yeah,
so what do I do? You lay your clothes out the night before so they're easy to get to when you're stumbling around and you're half asleep. You have your coffee mug ready. You have like this little treat to warm you up on the way to the gym. And it's like, you make discipline easy on yourself. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to as far as, making the systems work for you so you don't sabotage yourself.
absolutely. Because it works in every domain of life, right? If we're talking business, it's setting up business and marketing and content systems, right? Accountability systems. The fact that I have two business owners that keep me accountable and we're running this business together is an immense help in that sense. But when it comes to like health and fitness, the same principle applies. Like for me, a system is really okay. I have a schedule that I follow, that I go to the gym, and that's the schedule I follow. When I was training for my Ironman that I did 2 years ago now, it was like systems because I didn't know what I was doing, but like just follow the systems. So I keep going despite having low motivation or I don't know, despite any self image you might create or what kind of story you create about yourself or within that moment. It's just your subconscious trying to protect you, trying to preserve energy, trying to keep you safe. And it will be very clever, very creative with coming up with excuses.
Yeah, our egos are very, very good at that. Have you always kind of been a systems guy?
I would say so. I didn't realize it, but yeah, I think in systems. So when I have a new business idea, I think of the system, right? If I set a new goal for myself, I think of what's the system to go there. Doesn't mean I have the whole system clear
Sure.
on like the moment, but like because I believe in the sense that and your routines and habits can be systems, right? But you can have real systems as in automations running as well. System can be many different things, but I see a system as you're focusing on the right inputs for long enough so that they compound into extraordinary results, right?
Yeah.
So small actions compounded long enough. That to me is really a system. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that it took me forever to learn, man. And it's just not who I am naturally. And it's funny, I did when I was in Ranger Assessment Selection Program, you do it's like psychological eval all day. You do an interview with a psychiatrist and all this stuff, and like test after test. And it's like, do you love your mother? Does your lover mother? Does your is your mother your lover? Does your mother love you? Like all these, it's like it's intense. And so at the end of it, I have this talk with the psychiatrist, and he's like, you don't really like to prepare for things, and you'd rather just like rely on an ability to pull things out of your ass, huh? And I'm like, and I was like, 23 or something at the time, and I'm like, wow, like it kind of like called me out. I never really thought of that before. But then, fast forward to I'm out of the military, I'm in my business, and it is my gym, and it's being run straight off of like force of personality. And that works for a little bit and it works for a couple little things, but without systems in place, it is just like burnout city. You've got like everything starts to break. And so when there's just like one fire a day that you have to put out, and then, oh, if you're trying to scale, you've got all these other things that you have to solve. And the problems become insurmountable without systems in place. And so learning those systems and learning how to implement them into a business is just, it's liquid gold. That's why I listen to people like you.
Yeah, it really is. Like, especially if we're talking about scaling, right? It's impossible without systems, really. Like,
Mm.
and that's what we find with, well, the company name is really Right Build Scale. Um, and we find that at this stage of where we're at, we're growing really fast. And when you grow fast, you have growing pains as well. And some of the systems you had built initially start to break, and you need to build new systems that allow for yeah, bigger scale, really, which is just very interesting period to be in. And it setting up those new systems that really allow you to scale, to me, is a very fascinating and interesting thing. But it's without systems, you cannot even get there in the first place, really.
Yeah. Especially today. So, like in 2026, systems look so different to me now as a solopreneur at the moment. I think I'll end up hiring here in the next 6 months or something. But the systems look so different with how powerful AI is. And I'm not a person I'm very curious to get your take on it. I'm not a person who thinks AI is going to just like revolutionize everything and change. I do think it's slowly changing a lot of the way that we do things, but it just looks different now. Nothing is actually fundamentally different about solving people's problems and getting paid for it. But so within those like kind of the systems now, I would love to get your take on, how the systems fit with people. Because for me, it's like my business will always be people first. And that doesn't mean that I won't use AI. I use it every day. But, as far as like the people that you're with, I feel like that's just so important. Even this conversation, right? Like, I'm like, yeah, I want to talk to this person. He seems like a cool guy. And like that's important to me, and it makes me happy, and so I keep doing it. I don't think that'll ever go away.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if that goes away, then what's really left, and what are you really doing it for?
Mhm.
But it's a very interesting conversation, right?
Yeah.
Especially with something like AI. We have really found that we are using AI primarily to free up more time and energy for things like this,
Mhm.
so that there's more room in the schedule to do podcast interviews like this, to work with our coaching clients, right? To do the unscalable, actually. That's where I find the most use in AI. So I take a look at what are some of the tasks I find myself doing on a weekly or daily basis that can either be automated, delegated, should be eliminated, or otherwise batch produced. And ideally, how can I use AI to do it? Um, and there's quite a lot. But then the goal for me really is so that I can do more of the human stuff, right? Really have more the face to face conversations, interactions, coaching. Um, that's the way I see it, because I think in that sense, right, AI is a tool to be used and a tool that can be very effective. I don't think it's going to replace us as humans in that sense, right? And even if you look back at, I don't know, ChatGPT was released a few years ago. A lot of people already said, like, by the time it's 2026 or 2027, like, everyone's going to be replaced already. It's not the case. Like, we're still all humans. We're still here. Like, what's going to be left if everything is automated? Not much, right? So I am indeed human first in that sense.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see how it all continues to shake out because I do think some industries are going to be affected incredibly. You know, when
Yeah.
we start getting self-driving trucks out on the road, like that's going to shake up a lot of things, at least in the United States and elsewhere. It's just there are industries that are going to be ravaged by it, but it's like everyone loves to bring up the Model T, and it's like, oh, when the car was invented, then horses went away. I'm like, well, horses didn't just die. Like we still have horses, the industry changes though. And so there's like horse racing and there's betting and there's equestrian services and there's therapy and there's all these different things now that horses do. And I kind of feel like that's something similar is going to happen with the jobs that AI, quote unquote, takes. Um, but this idea though that like you're using AI to free up time for you to be more creative, I think is a really powerful one. I also think I'm very curious. I know some of the experiences I've had, but like, as an entrepreneur and all these AI systems are very recently introduced, the ones that we're actually like using today. Um, in that time of introduction, what experiences like, of experimentation did you do? And what did you kind of like learn, as far as how much of my creativity is this trying to siphon away? And how do I balance, how do I use AI intentionally? I think is the
Mm.
question I'm looking for.
Yeah, yeah. I would say that from my personal perspective, for example, the way I use AI, because I'll be transparent and upfront, I use AI a lot, right? So when it comes to creating a long form content, AI writes a lot of the content for me. But the idea, the stories, the case studies, the experiences, the insights are all mine.
Mm,
So the way I use AI, for example, in my long form writing is I go out on a walk with my dog.
mhm,
I have my phone with me, and for half an hour during that walk, I'll speak my article into existence. I'll share exactly what needs to be included and why, and I'll draw from my own experience. I'll draw from my experience working with our clients, right? So basically, everything that's in there is completely mine. It's just highly unstructured, right?
mm,
It's
mhm,
just my thoughts just out there. And then I use AI as like a ghostwriter to help me write it. Because to be fair, I don't mind. I don't really care about if I type the words myself, yes or no. I care about is the idea mine and are the insights mine and is the experience truly mine? Because I think that is something that I personally don't feel comfortable with. If I would say, like, I'm completely out of inspiration, AI, you come up with an article, you write it, that's it.
Yeah.
That to me feels cold and distant and it doesn't feel right. But the actual let's call it hard labor of like sitting down for 2 hours, typing the words, being frustrated that for me as a non-native English speaker, I don't always get the words right. I have to go back. I have to edit anyway. Like that's perfect to use AI for.
Yeah, I think it's very fun right now to watch these like kind of lines being drawn in the sand and people choosing camps, especially with the new what's it called? The whatever the technology is that Substack released that like measures AI. And everyone is just hot take after hot take, like it's way too quickly. And I'm like, well, relax for a second. Like, but it is a very funny thing to see because, I just think it's something that everyone has to figure out by, on their own. And honestly, I don't see why everyone really cares all that much because if your writing sucks, if the ideas are bad, and it's written in a way that doesn't resonate for me, I'm not going to read it. So I and if and the opposite is also true. I will read it if it's good. I don't care what went into the writing, morally. I think we're way too early on for me to be some kind of like, strike a gavel down and say that you're a bad person if you're using AI to write. But yeah, it's at the same time though. I definitely went through a process where I could feel me giving up too much of my creativity to
Mm,
AI. And that was an interesting thing to kind of like work through because I was like, oh, I can speed to iteration and I can be so productive and I can all this stuff. And that was good to learn what kind of productivity I wanted to have, but to take back the creativity in it because that's why I do this in the first place. I love writing, like actually writing.
yeah, I think that's also part of whenever a new technology like this comes around, which doesn't happen often, like such a significant thing like AI. It's so new and novel, you'll have to experiment with it to discover your limits, your use cases, what you find it to work best for you, right? And it's, I think, completely natural to experience that. That was for me as well. Like, I think in the beginning, I really felt this idea of like, oh, it's cheating. Like, it's not like it's cheating. I'm like, yeah, but it's the same if you're, I don't know, you're chopping down a tree and one of like you can use an axe or a chainsaw. Like, is it cheating? I don't know. The outcome, you're still working towards the same outcome. And I definitely think it's a process of like learning how you want to use the tool, what feels good to you, what feels right for you. Like, again, like to me, it doesn't feel right if I feel like the creation process, the ideation, the real experiences are not mine. I would feel really weird. Um, but also, I think especially with a tool like AI, it's good to understand its limitations, and it's good to understand that tools like ChatGPT and Claude, they're also programmed to really befriend you, right? And be really nice to you. And every idea you have is like, that's a great idea. Like, you should really do it. Even just having awareness about that that's what it's programmed to do, I think can avoid a lot of like actually time wasted. Like, and then you can prompt it, right? Saying like, "Hey, please don't agree with me. You don't have to talk that nice to me. Just I want your real, raw, honest feedback. I want real data to support my decision making." And then it will do that for you as well. But I do see that sometimes with people in our community, they use AI and they say like, "Oh, AI told me that this new product is great for me to develop," and I'm like, I'm not so sure, like, if that's really true.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that right now. The other thing with AI too is it wants to keep you in the chat, and so it keeps on.
Mhm.
It's like it starts prompting you, which is a very funny thing that I've started to notice. And I'm like, no, I don't. I want you to do what I told you to do. Like, what I mean? I don't
Yeah.
want to do anything extra. Then occasionally though, I'll be like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. Like, yes, I would like a spreadsheet actually that lays it.
That's the thing, like, should I turn it into a PDF first or a
Yeah,
spreadsheet?
exactly. It's just constantly pinging you like that. But it's again, it's awareness. And so something that I've thought about, recently at least, is because I've spent so much time learning about it and listening to other people's opinions on it, and just kind of diving into what it is, and just really spending the hours learning it and practicing with it myself. That I'm, much more competent than I ever would have been if I was a business owner, a business owner of like a brick and mortar, like say running a gym. There's no possible way that I would ever have the time or the energy to dedicate that I do now to learning this powerful new tool. And so I really think that puts people in a very good position who do know how to leverage the tool for others who can't.
Absolutely, and that reminds me also, and I do think it's good with, in particular, AI at the pace at which it's moving.
Mm,
If you completely decide to ignore it or not really engage with it, I do think it's a train that's moving really fast that will be hard to catch up with.
yeah.
And we have not seen anything in the history of humankind that's so fast, like developing so fast, changing so fast, and having such a big impact in that sense on the way we work. So I do think it's good to just have a base level of knowledge. You don't need to be like an expert on it, not at all, but just have a base level of knowledge, play with it, experiment with it, discover how you can use it and how you can't use it. I do think overall that's a good thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what this? I'm actually curious. So in the Netherlands, like, is there? So over here, it's like very centralized. So you basically got Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, a couple others that are all competing for, I don't know, top spot of this centralized AI thing. But I know that open source also exists, and there's also competitors. What have you seen explored much of that or?
No, not really. And I mean, being in the Netherlands, right, and in part of the European Union is always quite strict on like
Mhm,
privacy laws and
mhm,
all that type of stuff. So the majority of people here use either Chat or Claude or Gemini. Really, personally, I use Claude. Like, I find it to be really effective.
Yeah, yeah. And when I made the jump from Chat, because I started with Chat GPT and I was using it like a Google machine, at first, and then when I made the switch to Claude, and now it's it's amazing. I have it linked in with my CRMs, and it just keeps me so organized because it doesn't forget anything, and it reminds me. It's like having a super talented secretary who's just always on my ass about stuff, and it's great. But it is it is something that it took me hours and hours and hours of courses and like learning how to actually implement these things. And so yeah, I wonder if there's any kind of like for people that don't have that kind of time, like let's say the 9 to 5, the person who is like trying to build a business and I'm trying to figure all this out and all these tools, like how the heck, like is there like a source or something that you found that was really helpful and like worth the time to explore?
Mm. I don't have a source, to be honest. I was gonna say 20 minutes a day,
Mm,
because I believe with any new skill, whether it's learning a language or learning more about AI, if you have 20 minutes a day that you can dedicate to it consistently, ideally every day, that will already give you a whole lot of knowledge about and development in using it versus most others, right, who are not really using it. Because that's the exactly the way I learned. I think this was maybe one of those cases where I watched some YouTube videos here and there, but I can't even really remember which ones. And I was like, I just gotta use this tool. I gotta use it. I gotta experiment. I gotta ask it questions. If I have a thing, like I would look at my business and I would look at all the bottlenecks. For example, we had a lot of outreach for leads that I had to do manually. So I was like, can I automate this? I don't know. Let's ask the question to Claude.
mhm,
This is exactly how my outreach process goes. Is this something we can automate together? And it was like, yes, we can. Here's exactly how we can do it. And I built this automation with Claude. Claude really did it. I just prompted it, but it was just by asking the question, is this even possible? Yes, okay, how are we gonna do it? And just through repetition and playing around with it for 20 minutes a day, because the majority of my time would have to be spent on other elements of the business anyway. That's what I found to be very effective.
yeah, that iteration, or just again and again, and you mentioned kind of something, though you kind of said it, I don't know, like subtly, I guess, and that you're like, this is what my outreach looks like. This is my program, and so you have to explain. I think I
Yeah.
listened to like an Alex Hormozy or something like that, and he was just like, you can't just tell it to go do the dishes. You have to tell it to walk over to the dishwasher, open up the dishwasher, take the dishwasher, let dry, all these things, and I thought that was a really good point because when you start using it, you're prompting it like Google because you're not used to anything else. And then when you get used to it, you're like, oh, I have to. If you prompt it with a 1 page prompt every time that you built in Microsoft Word first and then transfer over, oh my gosh, the stuff that it can do for you is amazing.
Yeah. Another way to look at it is let's say you've just hired a new employee.
Mhm.
Would you also just tell them like, okay, now go and automate this entire thing? No, you would first train them on the actual business, on the products, on the funnels you have. Like that's the first thing you would do. Give them context really, so that they can then execute the task as well as possible. And context, especially when it comes to AI, matters. Like context matters so much. If you provide it, for example, right when talk about my long form writing process that I use voice memo and then it will turn it into an article. That's way too simplified actually, because I shared all the Medium articles I ever published, even about productivity, hundreds of them. I shared it as context with AI, and all the articles we have published on our Substack publication for Write Build Skill, shared it also as context with AI. So it has both a knowledge bank it can draw from, but also my writing style, my formatting style. Because without that context, it's not going to give you the results you are looking for, or it's going to give you very generic results. And that's like when you spot those clear AI tells, especially in writing.
Mhm.
So context really matters. Yeah.
And what you're kind of getting to is AI to me is exposing how many people don't know what context they even have. Like they don't understand the systems that are operating in their business. And so if you don't understand that, there's no way that AI is going to do anything for you except make it even muddier. And then people are like, I'm not having success. I can't do this. Like the AI doesn't work and it's not doing this. And it's like, well, let's rewind, forget about AI for a second, and like let's understand like how are you positioned, what does your packaging look like, what is your outreach program, what is the fulfillment process that you have, like can you actually define that? And most people can't. And and even people that have had success are like, I don't even know. It's pretty wild to see.
It really is. It really is, because it's new and novel to have this direct feedback from a machine really, versus maybe a team or employee where it's not that direct in terms of you get an instant outcome. And what I really had to train myself was, if I got an answer or outcome from AI that I wasn't happy with, and I would be like, "Oh, it doesn't work. Let me do it myself again." I would really force myself to be like, "Okay, no, this was my fault. I somehow wasn't specific enough in what I wanted,
Mm.
or I somehow didn't give it enough context. So let's go back and like iterate, share what I want from it." Um, and it's really a new skill to learn versus it's just this is not good enough. I'll do it myself, or now I'll take it myself. It's like, no, how can I probably messed up here. How can I make sure the outcome is better? And that's been very helpful. It took me a long time. Like it took me probably about a year and a half to even
Yeah.
even understand that, oh, it's me who's not using it optimally. It's not the tool, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, same process I went through, and it was like, especially when it was writing, when I was kind of messing around to see how it could assist me with my writing, and I can't tell you how many times I was like, "This is absolute dog shit." Like I'm doing it myself, and then that just led me like, yeah, okay, it's okay. So what can it help me with? It can help me organize my thoughts if I'm just like diarrhea of the mouth and just I can't really figure it out. And so like it'll help me organize my thought, provide me with an outline that I can follow. And that makes the writing process so much better. And I had someone just the other day in the gym, I was kind of explaining that I do consulting and ghostwriting. And he was like, "Oh, are you worried about AI, taking over, especially for writing?" And I was like, "No, not at all, because AI doesn't have the context or the vantage point that I do. They don't have it doesn't have the exact point of view that I can provide with years and years of unique human to human experiences. It just doesn't have that."
Yep.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I see it in a way where I think for a lot of businesses, for example, if you need lead generation,
Mhm,
you can and you're a business owner, you can now say, okay, you know what? I'm going to use AI for lead generation, but it's a new skill to learn regardless. Like you'll have to spend time and energy there, which per definition means you won't have that time and energy available to run the business you're already running, which is already probably quite busy. So, still, to me, there's going to be a need to hire someone to help you do it. That person might be using AI,
mhm,
but you'll still be hiring someone to do it for you or learn it from as a direct source. So, I'm not too worried about, like, in that sense, AI completely replacing, like a lot of what we do, really. I do see the necessity for you gotta like level up, right? You gotta level up. So if it will replace some people in that sense, right? It's not gonna replace us as humans, in my opinion, but it definitely will replace some people who just like take design as an example. I am horrible at design.
mhm,
There's AI tools out there that can help you with design, but it's still not going to be exactly the way you want it to. But there's going to be a designer using AI who can get it exactly right in a fraction of the time,
mhm.
probably at a lower cost than they could before. Cool. I will pay you to do it because I have the outcome I want faster. I don't have to learn it myself, right? So I do see it in that way. It's not going to replace us fully. It's not going to replace a lot of opportunities. It's going to add opportunities to it, but you need to be at the forefront, I think, of learning how this works.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I also think this is we've been trending this way since the internet, and it is so competitive now compared to what it used to be. And so, because
Mhm.
all of these skills are available for free on the internet, most of them, like you can, if you have the man hours to search and find and listen and, integrate whatever that takes to learn. I mean, it's all available, and you can have an audience. I can, as long as I have a cell phone, which everyone has a cell phone, basically. You can have a business now, and you
Yeah.
compete. You can compete for other people's attention and their money, and that was never the case, in our for our parents' generation, or even as short, as short time ago as our parents' generation. And so
Yeah.
everything's changing.
It's now no longer a matter of do you have the resources, it's a matter of do you have the resourcefulness, really.
Mm.
Uh, of course, right, there's always going to be an element of resources involved, but the level, like the playing field has been leveled significantly, and it already that was already the case indeed with like social media, for example. I credit my entire entrepreneurial career to the fact that social media exists and the internet exists, and it's like I could create something online with practically zero startup cost, maybe a domain name here and there, really reach people worldwide and generate an income that way. That's incredibly unique in the sense that if we go back 20 years ago, that was not possible, right? It was simply not possible. And I think AI only accelerates that. It only adds a layer on top of what's possible. And everyone has access to these resources, really.
So in this kind of sea of people who are, some are resourceful, some are not, but there's so much. So how does someone kind of stand out?
Mm, mm. Standing out is a combination of factors, really. So standing out is it can be knowing exactly who you serve and what you help them with, because there's a lot of people who are not clear about that. Standing out is leveraging and highlighting your own stories and what you believe in, right? So like even it okay, funny example. On Substack, I share quite a lot of pictures about my dog. My profile pictures, even me and my dog. That's a way to stand out because I love my dog. I can talk about him the whole day. I can send you pictures the whole day as well. So it's very genuine. But I get a lot of people who are dog owners messaging me. We first have a conversation about dogs for 10 to 20 minutes, and all of a sudden they become a buyer.
Hmm.
So it's not in that sense even it's that personality, the personal touch point, the personal connection they have that made them buy from me, maybe over someone else who's doing the same. So standing out could be really, I would say, be yourself, really, um, and dare to share your message, what you believe in, what you stand for, because there's going to be a crowd who's going to be fully against it and doesn't want to buy from you. But the others who are like, yes, this is me. I resonate. I recognize myself in this person. They will buy from you, right? And that's always going to be better than being bland and generic, because that's going to be difficult. Yeah.
I think a lot of people end up trying to be who they think other people want,
Mhm.
and instead of just being themselves. And that's like the first layer of it is like, okay, so how do you stand out? Authenticity, right? But then it's like, it's kind of what you're suggesting, at least on a superficial level, but it's like authenticity. And then it's like, okay, so underneath that there's probably another layer, and it's like, okay, so how do I do that? How do I translate who I am? How do I translate that message? Is there any kind of like way to cut to that?
Yeah, I think it's actually it's quite it's good that you ask, because I think the answer might almost be in not even asking that question in the first place. So the moment you start to think about it too much, you're already curating and
Mm-hmm.
you're already filtering yourself. So that's why I love doing interviews like this and I love doing Substack lives, because I cannot stick to a script. I cannot edit anything out. If I make a mistake, it's really there. If I say something, I've already said it, right? And that to me is a way of being myself, and it's a way of our audience or new people really getting a feeling of who I am, who you are, my business partners, who they are, without really any form of positioning, without really any form of building a brand. At least that doesn't work for me. Like I can go on a live, I can't stick to a script, or I can't stick to like, yeah, So I'm not even. It's not even a conscious question I ask myself too much. It's just, yeah, how could you, especially on things like this, or on a live stream on Substack in particular, but also in your content, what genuinely excites you? Cool, share it. And the moment you start typing it as a Substack note, you're excited, and it's like, should I do it? What will people think of it? Will some people disagree with it? Probably. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't share. Like you start filtering yourself already. So I think if you feel it, just get it out there, publish it. That's probably the best way to do it.
It's so cool, right? Because so this is really resonating for me right now. I had a conversation a couple nights ago with a mentor of mine, and she was really cool because so I guess I have struggled and struggle with a noisy ego, and something that wants to strategize all the time, and something that is very aware of how people are perceiving me. And that comes from childhood all the way up through the military and all these other things. It's just like doubled down, very aware of that. I've done a lot of like work on that, and it's been really cool. But what you're talking about right now is very pertinent to someone like me, because often we are so focused on doing things that support the identity that we want to embrace. And that's not a bad thing. Doing things is not bad. I like doing things. Action is good. But it's not so much about doing, it's more about being.
Mhm.
And that I think is it's a really cool lesson that we learn over and over and over again. That if we just are, then the doing comes naturally.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I think this is also an element where let's you just use the scenario here of indeed creating online, building online. It's okay that the moment you get started with this, you don't feel like I can be myself. Why? Because it's new. It's literally like if you would walk into a room full of people you don't know, and it's an unfamiliar room in a situation that you're new to, it's hard to be fully genuinely yourself, right? So, but it's when you've been in that room a dozen times, a hundred of times, thousands of times, it's easier, of course, to be instead of do. So it's in that sense for me now easy to say. If I go back to my Medium days when I got started, I would really filter myself, right? And I would not be myself in that sense. So it's also a process, right? It's a process in that sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people would say, like, "Fake it till you make it," but I think that's not the right words because you don't wanna fake anything, and it's like, be who you're becoming, instead of faking it till you make it, yeah.
Yeah.
So with you guys, I think you guys are obviously like, there's so much happening for you right now with your business. Where do you see the future kinda taking you? You also just said, you have a baby on the way. Where do you see all this going for you? What are you excited
Yeah.
about?
Yeah. I'm more thinking about how can we ride this wave of momentum? And that's on a business level with the three of us, but also on a personal level with indeed the baby on the way. I'm not even trying to make long term plans
Mhm.
because I don't know what 5 years from today I'll be doing or what it's going to look like, or 3 years today. Um, and I kind of let go of significant long term planning, and I really work in 90-day cycles. Like I believe in this concept of a 90-day year where the things you would like to achieve in a year, like as yearly goals, compress it to 90-day cycles so there's more urgency to act and move. And that's how I kind of really see things. I almost see them from quarter to quarter. So the fact that right now and over the last year we've been growing really fast at Right Build Scale, the conversation is not even where do we want to be in 3 years from now, but the conversation is, okay, this is happening right now. What are the constraints we're facing right now? How can we resolve those constraints, build systems that allow us to go to the next level? Because I do also find when it comes to like long-term vision, long-term goal setting, you can set a ceiling for yourself even with those goals. So a ceiling of, okay, if in 3 years I want to be there, you like exceeding that ceiling is almost impossible because you've already set a ceiling for yourself.
Mhm.
So I try to like not, of course I daydream and I think about the future. That's not really what I'm talking about. It's more like actually quantifying it and setting goals. I am a believer in 90-day goals really that create urgency, and that make me act. Because if I would have a too long of a time frame to achieve something, I'll spend a lot of time wasting as well.
Yeah, gosh, that's a fact. So what are some of your kinda like 90 what's your 90-day horizon look like right now?
Yeah, 90-day horizon right now is significantly, I mean, with the baby on the way, could literally be any day right now.
Yeah, cool.
So the 90-day cycle looks different now than it would normally look. So now the way it looks um, is really that the business should be able to run without too much of my active involvement, at least for the next few weeks when birth happens. It should like it's me figuring out becoming a dad, and parenthood, um, and creating the overall space to be able to do that. But then jumping back to also the wave of momentum we have with the business and figuring out life as a dad and entrepreneur, which is a new thing. It's a new ride. So in that sense, the next 90 days are actually more of a new adventure than anything I can quantify or plan. I realized that this is unplannable to a large degree.
Yeah. This is so something that I really appreciate about, I guess, your style or just who you are, I think, is that, I can just sense like the humility all the time. And that's something I really look for in people that I want to listen to. If someone comes at something like they know everything about that there is to know about it, I'm kind of like, I second guess that, just because the older I get, the more I know that I don't know. And so I really appreciate that. And so I guess that's leading into maybe some like final thoughts here is like, how do you maintain this kind of like learning, like you're always learning, you're always open. I think it's an openness. How do you maintain your kind of position as an expert while being a student yourself?
Mm, I love that question. It's more the realization that if I don't, I will fall behind. That's as
Mm,
simple as it is. So even if right now, take Substack as an example, to a lot of people, we are the go-to source to learn about Substack growth and monetization. If I and we as a team would stop learning, stop developing ourselves, stop developing our skills, we won't be that anymore 3 months, 6 months, 12 months from now. So it's this realization that it feels good to now have achieved a certain position. But if that's the mind frame, "Oh, cool, we're here now,"
mm,
then I know that's gonna be very short-lived. So, "Okay, cool, we're here now. Now how can we stay here?" Right? And I feel that with any walk of life, if that applies to your fitness as well as your relationship, you can have a great relationship, great, but how do you now maintain a great relationship, right? Or you can have a great, strong body, how do you now maintain it or even make it stronger? So, to me, yeah, it's that sense of like if you're not developing yourself, investing in yourself, learning new things, eventually you're gonna fall behind. You might be able to cruise for a few months and be good, but eventually you're gonna notice the effects. And that I think is also like a big thing about today's conversation. It is really about that compound effect, both in a positive and negative, right? Like the actions you put in on a day-to-day basis, which might seem irrelevant on a day-to-day basis, you zoom out over years and they lead to extraordinary results. But the same goes for inaction. So a time like inaction on a daily basis, you might get away with it for a few weeks, few months, but eventually it's going to catch up in your health, in your business, in your relationship, your finances. So that compound effect is something I'm always thinking of in a sense.
yeah, man, words of wisdom. Do you have anything else that you want to share before we kind of get going? This has been a really cool conversation. I'm excited to listen to it again.
Yeah, yeah, loving the conversation, Rich. Absolutely. I mean, the last thing I would like to share is build a life you don't need an escape from,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Like, and even if right now things are hard, that's okay. Like, still escaping the hardness will only increase it, right? It will only make it more difficult. So build this life that you don't need an escape from, really. And that could look differently for anyone. For me, it's having the freedom of a business. It could be a 9 to 5 for someone else, right? I'm not like everything is fine. It's really about you. It's about your vision. It's about your life. What do you want? And spend your days working towards it, right? Even if it's just a little bit every day.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, recognize that as you're building a life that you don't need to escape from, you're not going to do that all at once. And remember that compounding effect. Yeah, I love it, man. Love it. Thank you so much. This has been really, really cool. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I really appreciate it, and yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to it as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Jari. And we'll make sure we get where people can find you. We'll put it all in the show notes and everything, so people will be able to click you from there. Is there any kind of like last message that you want to throw out in that regard?
Well, if you're interested in building on Substack, growing on Substack, then click on some of the links that are right here in the show notes. Because with Right Build Scale, that's what we do. So if you're interested in it, feel free to check it out. We're happy to have you in the community.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Take care, Rich.
Cheers.